Okay, so as you can see here, the main title is A Compatibilist Account of Free Will. So go ahead and put a triangle over the word compatibilist. You should recognize that from the reading and some previous notes that we took on some other arguments. And then put a triangle between free will, between the words free and will. So put it in the center right here, and then draw an arrow from the triangle to free will and an arrow from the triangle to the word will. All right, so let's go ahead and start this reading. Okay, so Stace begins, I shall first discuss the problem of free will. So go ahead and do your triangle like I told you to do earlier. Okay, so when I say put a triangle between two words and with arrows, that's what I mean, right? So the triangles for the whole for the word phrase free will. For it is certain that if there is no free will, so put a triangle as such right here as well, there can be no morality. Put a triangle over morality. Okay, so he's teasing out the implications right here, right? If there's no free will, then there can be no morality. Morality is concerned with what men ought and ought not to do. Go ahead and put a triangle over there. So here he's defining a concept. He's telling us what he means by the word morality. But if a man has no freedom to choose what he will do, if whatever he does is done under compulsion, then it does not make sense to tell him that he ought not to have done what he did and that he ought to do something different. Okay, so if I were to say that we need to put a triangle over two words in line 4, what would be the first word that we would put a triangle over? Freedom. So go ahead and put a triangle over freedom, and then next what word? Choose. Another word that I'm going to want you to put a word around, triangle over is the word compulsion. I also want you to come over to the side and write the word compulsion. And I want you to go to a dictionary, an online dictionary, and I want you to find a really good definition for compulsion. I want you to look at more than one definition. I want you to find a definition for this word that you think goes best with this paragraph. Given the context of how this word is being used, what would be the best definition that you find for what is being discussed here? So look for the definition after we get done with this paragraph. You're going to handwrite your definition out here. Write it really small in case we write out additional notes here. And then be sure to, you don't have to write down the URL, but give me like dictionary.com. So give me the website name, like a .com. But I would also like for you to include the URL in the comments section. So when you're uploading this document, you will see that there's a comment section. Copy and paste a direct URL to the definition that you write by hand right here. Okay, so this is an important concept, and it relates to, as you will see, with when you find a relevant definition. And remember, argument by definition. We're not doing an argument by definition, but remember, when you're doing research for a definition, you need to find one that is relevant given the context, right? So not all definitions for compulsion will be equally good. You need to find a really good one based on the context in here. Also remember, when you look for a definition in this class, no version of the word that you are defining can itself be in the definition. All right, so put a triangle over compulsion then. If I was to say in line 6, so in line 6, we're not going to put a triangle over anything, neither in line 7. He goes on to say, all moral precepts in such case would be meaningless. So again, put a triangle over the word moral and over precepts as well. I would like for you to go ahead and do with precepts what I told you to do with compulsion. Okay, so we're building your vocabulary. Also, if he acts under compulsion, notice what he says, what? Always under compulsion. Always under compulsion. How can he be held morally responsible for his actions? How can he, for example, be punished for what he could not help doing? All right, so now let's go ahead and go to line 7. Put a triangle over the word. I'm going to do this one with you. Put a triangle like this, and then it's going to go, the triangle's for the word moral, but it's also precepts. So in order to understand what he means by moral precepts, you have an understanding or a sense of what he means by moral, because he already told us what moral refers to in line 3. But what might he mean by precepts? And so what does that mean in terms of what is a moral precept? So again, whatever I said about a definition for compulsion, that applies for precepts as well. What do you think I'm going to have you put a triangle over in line 9? It's going to be a triangle that applies also to a word for line 10, and that is going to be for moral responsibility. So let's do it like this. Okay, so the triangle is for moral responsibility. And now that I'm looking at line 8, what is a word that we should have a triangle in line 8 towards the end? Acts. Okay, so then going to line 10, after the word responsible, what should we also have a triangle over? Actions. So make sure you're putting a triangle over all the words that I'm saying you should verbally have a triangle over. All right, and then in line 10, an important concept that we want to put a triangle over is the word, if I was to say pick a word, it's a new word that we haven't put a triangle over, or we have emphasized it. Think about Dave. Remember we talked about, was it Dave killing Todd or Todd killing Dave? I can't remember, but we had like 7 scenarios where somebody else killed somebody else, and we were asking whether he should be considered a criminal and be held fully morally responsible for killing somebody else, which would, of course, affect his punishment, right? So obviously the word that I want you to put a triangle over is punished. So what's going on here in this paragraph? So let's write up here that Stace is presenting the intellectual, philosophical context for a problem he wants to address. Okay. Stace is presenting the intellectual, philosophical context for a problem he wants to address. And so the idea here is, hey man, if there's no free will, there can be no morality. If there's no morality, we can't hold people morally responsible for their actions. And if we can't hold people morally responsible for their actions, then it doesn't seem like we should be punishing anyone, right? And then so that's kind of like the conclusion. We shouldn't be punishing anyone. He doesn't think, that doesn't sit well with him, okay? His idea here that is implicit, that he doesn't make explicit, is the fact that we do punish people. Therefore, punishment must have some meaning. And if it is to have meaning, then there must be moral responsibility and hence free will. So starting with the idea that we do in fact punish people, then it seems like that we must be wrong about something when it comes to moral responsibility and free will. So he continues in the next paragraph. It is to be observed that those learned professors of philosophy or psychology who deny the existence of free will do so only in their professional moments and in their studies and lecture rooms. So a word that I would want for you to put a triangle over here would be 2 words. What word do you think needs a triangle with 2 arrows? Free will, okay? So notice who he's focusing on now, right? The philosophers and the psychologists. And notice how he's pointing, and he calls them what? He calls them, we can call them deniers of free will, right? Deny the existence of free will. So we can call them free will deniers. And he's identified a group of people who are free will deniers. And notice that in what context he says that they deny free will. What are the contexts? He calls them professional moments. Okay, so maybe when they're giving a talk or discussing with their colleagues what free will is, in their studies and in their lecture rooms. In other words, they deny free will when it comes to the theory part of their lives, right? Then he says, for when it comes to doing anything practical, okay, let's go ahead and put a triangle over that. Even of the most trivial kind, they invariably behave as if they were free. So he thinks that he's pointing out a contradiction here. What do you think I want to put a triangle over in line 17? Free, right? And let's go ahead and put a triangle over behave because that has to do with actions, right? Okay, so he's saying that what? We'll call it free will deniers, or we'll say, that's what we'll say, free will deniers, theories, academic practices, and behaviors are in tension with their everyday practical lives outside of academia. He says, so now he's going to give examples, right? So then he goes, we're going to have examples here. Examples pointing to said inconsistency. Mind you, if we were in the classroom, we would take turns reading a sentence, and then I would ask you guys, you know, what word should we have a triangle over? So this would be a joint reading, joint analysis with a little bit of lecture from me. Okay, so now he's going to give examples pointing to said inconsistency. And of course, the examples are from their practical lives outside of academia and their academic pursuits. So look at the different actions he says. They inquire from you at dinner whether you will choose this or that dish. So they're using the word choice, right? As if you do have a choice, as if you yourself can determine and be a cause of what you will do. Go ahead and put a triangle over the word choose. Here's another example. They will ask a child why he told a lie and will punish him for not having chosen the way of truthfulness, for what he ought to do. In other words, here he's talking about how a philosopher or a psychologist, learned men, we've got to remember this was written during this time, so it was probably just men who were in academia doing this at this time, so that's why he keeps saying men. But notice that he is saying, look, we do punish people. Even these people who deny free will punish their children for not doing what they ought to do, right? So ask the child why he told a lie, right? And we'll punish him, right? So think about what he said up here about punishment, the question he asked. For not having chosen, again, the concept of choice. In their everyday life, they might think that a child had a choice, therefore they punish him. The way of truthfulness, again, for not being moral, okay? So go ahead and put a triangle over what word? Punish. And then what word do we need a triangle over next in line 19? Chosen. All right. All of which is inconsistent. Put a triangle over inconsistent. Remember, a really important criterion in philosophy that you learned about in the chapter 1 reading of your Smart Book lessons is that consistency is really important in philosophy. Now, Law had stressed inconsistency with respect to one set of ideas with another, or a claim with another claim. But philosophers will also talk about consistency or compatibility between one's ideas and one's practices, real life. Okay, so all of which is inconsistent, so put a triangle over the word inconsistent with disbelief in free will. That is with denying free will. So go ahead and put a triangle with arrows over free will. This should cause us to suspect the problem is not a real one. And this, I believe, is the case. So he's saying, the problem. So he thinks that there is a problem with what? It's a problem that he raises in here. And what is the problem? It's basically right here. He says, right, I shall first discuss the problem of free will. So the problem of free will is kind of captured by all of this, right? If there is no free will, then people can't choose to do otherwise. And if they can't choose to do otherwise, we can't hold them morally responsible for the actions. And if we can't hold people morally responsible for the actions, they could not choose otherwise. So when he's referring to this problem, he's referring to paragraph 1. So let's just say see paragraph 1. Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to go ahead and start another video for the second page of the document markup and notes. You'll upload all of your pages via the same link.